we spend a lot of time talking about technology, and we've spent a lot of time talking about transformation. And the kind of the set the stage for the conversation is we look at the activities we do as a business into three buckets, essentially. This is oversimplification, but there's part of the activities that we do that just focus on runs, the things we have to do to keep the lights on, to keep the business going. And what I find in most organizations, most of our time, energy, and money goes into that bucket. Depending on the maturity of the organization, that can be anywhere from 65 to 90, 95% of their energy goes into just keeping the lights on, going through the motions. We then talk about the second bucket is a growth bucket. This is where organizations face on expanding their footprint, expanding their reach, expanding their capabilities in what they do. In many cases, in what we're talking about here is maybe looking at how we're expanding to serve our population better, either bringing in more kind of care for our population or reaching out to a wider band of the population. And we find good organizations are able to spend 10 to 20% of their time in this growth activity, in this time, energy, and money that they put in there. Then the last bucket, which I think is the most important bucket that we need to look at, is what we call transformation. This is changing the way we do business. This is to be able to scale, to be able to reach people. It sounds like, Ertha, in your environment, you guys had embraced the telehealth thing before a lot of organizations did, to a larger scale than many organizations. And then when COVID reared its ugly head, you were able to rapidly respond and shift your business model almost overnight without having to retool things. So that to me is a transformational element that exists within your organization. So I want to focus on that bucket the most, because that's where I think the biggest bang for us to kind of make a change and have an impact is there. So first of all, in your organizations, and Manuel, I'll start with you on this one. How are you looking at transformation as an organization? Is it a big part of your conversation? Is it something that you're trying to drive personally as the CIO of the organization?
Yeah, I like to believe so, Tim. I think the way that you define those three buckets, I think it will work a lot of the same way. Personally, I know that it, again, based on the technical maturity where you are as an organization, using digital tools, things like that, determine where IT fits into the puzzle at that point in time. And for us, very much right now, it's more about a lot of the KTL, or keep the lights on, right? Yeah. And so what I mean by that is frictionless experiences, trying to reduce technical debt, and really focusing on consistent, repeatable approaches to the tech that we deliver. Mm-hmm. Before we want to get to that innovative, business aligned, technology department, we have to make sure that we're delivering on the foundation, right? We can't build upon an environment that's constantly changing or that's not stable for the business in the context of the business. So for us, very much so, very closely aligned. 60% of that work today is very much on making sure that IT is focused on foundational security, confidentiality, integrity of our systems before we move on to very much the what we call the sexy side of IT, right? But it's very much a journey. Not to say we're not doing that. In the absence of those three buckets, right? IT always has to be focused on any one of those levers, those three levers, if you would. And if we pull the gas off of one of them, we fail as an organization. So yeah, that's kind of our view on it right now.
Yeah, and it's about shifting. Go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, I just want to jump in here right away and say, I want to follow up on what Manuel was saying. The way in which I see it too is that we shifted over the decades, where in healthcare, the physician was the center of the universe. And what the physician said was based on what the physician was taught. And then as time has gone on, we moved from that, we moved into more of a business model where the business became, the major component. And now what I feel is that everything should be answerable to IT. IT is now the center of the universe. And from our quality to our finance, to our population management, to any type of data collection, everything actually resolves around it. And I feel that one of those things that we need to be actually looking at is how we shift and realize that this is now our center and how it impacts every other aspect of our health lives. that to me is where we need to be moving to, because even as you speak of growth, in business, we thought about increasing more buildings, we thought about increasing, more structure.
Mm.
But as we are looking now at the new world that we're living in, maybe we have to be considering shrinking those, becoming cognizant that you have people who are at home and they want to work from home, and therefore we don't need to have them coming into offices anymore. We can get the same bang for our buck if they were to work from home and not be in an office at this time. So all of that helps with reducing cost, and it also helps with employee satisfaction. So I think those are some of the areas in which, as we talk again about IT and where we're going with it, those are the things I feel we need to concentrate on.
Well, I think it's interesting that a chief medical officer says that technology is the center of healthcare going forward. But I think the issue with it, what you're getting to, right, is that technology has the ability to be transformational, right? It changes the way we do things. And if we focus on using the technology in the right way, we can create things that allow us to move faster, treat more patients. And one of the things I think that I heard you say, and I think that we had to experience this a little bit in the COVID years, is that for the longest time, healthcare has become this thing where everyone comes to one centralized location, right? So it's this centralization. In the IT world, Manuel, you've been around, for not quite as long as I have been, but you remember the days of the mainframes where everyone came to one computing platform. What I see happening is there's now a distribution of that, right? It's being distributed as opposed to being centralized. And the ultimate goal of that is our employees and our patients don't have to come into a facility for some of the services that we need to deliver, and some of the work we need to do. So only way to be able to bridge that gap is through technology. And I think what we saw when we talked in our preparation sessions for this, I think in both organizations, you guys saw that you were able to shift pretty quickly to have people work remotely and to serve patients remotely as this happened, because you had done the right things in preparing for a more agile technology platform to run on. Is that true, or did I miss something there?
I would say that that's true. I think, as an FQHC organization, nonprofit, safety net healthcare centers like ours, we have to be able to adapt very quickly to the needs of the organization and to the needs of our community and our patients. So yes, we went all in on remote work early on in some areas of the business that made more sense than others. Now it's more about kind of reverse engineering that. Now we've had time to, we've had a couple of years of that. How do we make more frictionless experiences for our employees? How do we enable hybrid work? How do we make digital native, if you would, make sense for our organizations?
Yeah, and also too, you've experienced in one of our last sessions we talked about the fact that we now distribute the workforce also increases our risk. So it's also managing risk and compliance at a different level too, right? So as we go forward and do that, how about on your side, were you able to make and navigate? You said it sounds like on the patient side that you were good to do that. How did it work on the employee side? Ertha.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize that question was for me. Could you just ask the question again?
Yeah, so I was saying that on your side, I know that you mentioned that you did the telehealth early on, you're able to make the migration, and that really helped you out during the COVID years. How were you prepared and able to transition when your employees became having to work remotely? More so.
It's quite interesting that we couldn't get all of our employees to work remotely, but we were able to identify, for example, our call center. Many of them were working within an office setting, and we realized as COVID progressed, there was no need for many of them to be in the office. So we were able to assign them at home. There was also some other areas, ancillary services that we were able to actually just have them work from home. We found that providing them with the technology from home became one of those things that we had to address. It even went as far as whether or not they got things like ergonomic, seats and computers and various things like that. I think that as time has gone on, we've had to rethink as a company how we are going to move forward in the future, and whether or not, as I said, even in terms of growth, do we grow, exponentially by having more buildings, or whether or not we grow by having more people within their own buildings. And that is something that we've been still struggling with. We know that for providers, many of them who do telehealth, and we do have a number of them, there are pros and cons to that, in that, yes, you get to still meet with your patients, and COVID helped with at least improving that aspect of it. We would have more access. But then at the same time, you don't have the ability to actually have contact with your patients. But more and more, we're seeing that there's, as we progress in the decades to come, we are being exposed to more infectious type diseases. COVID is just one of them. Now we have monkeypox, which is another one. And with that, many of us may not be able to practice the way we would like to, where we are able to examine our patients. Some of us may have to do this from a distance. And I feel that that's, again, having the technology already available to provide that type of meeting with patients is very important.
I think you guys brought up a good point too, right? So there's a couple of things that are happening here. Number one is that there is a desire with some of the workforce to work remote. That's been, especially in areas that have long commutes, difficult traffic modes, things like that. So the remote working, it makes a lot of sense for some employees. If you're like me, I love being in the office, love being around a lot of people, but in some cases, it's not our choice. We're not making the decision whether or not we can be in that environment. Something greater than us is saying, you can't do this because of, COVID, monkeypox, whatever. By the way, I thought monkeypox was a joke when I first heard this. It's like, what's now? We're gonna have locusts, falling from the sky, but yeah. But the idea behind this is that, we have to be able to respond and react. And I think where I heard you say, Ertha, that I think is important, and Manuel, we talked about this, I think the last time we talked, is that we have to design our organizations for the future, right? We have to get them stable for it supports what we're doing today, but we have to be thinking about what's going to look like 5 years, 10 years from now. We know infectious diseases are an increase. We know that's going to be a reality that we're going to be faced with. This wasn't a once in a century kind of thing to happen. We're going to face this more and more and more. We're a global world, and these diseases are spreading faster and faster, no matter with what precautions we have. We have to be able to respond. The desires of our workforce are going to change, right? And they're going to want to have different things that we need to provide, and from a technology perspective. So if we want to retain the best talent, we have to be able to meet them where they're at, versus where we want them to be at. So I think that's a big reality that we have to face as we go forward with this. So when we talk about technology, and we talk about how it's actually changing the nature of our business, one of the conversations that we had with both is that it's not just about making it so someone can work from home, but it's also how do we use technology to change the process, the workflow, the actual work being done. And Ertha, I'm going to go back to you for a second on this. You kind of shared with me an experience where you were looking at specific parts of your business that you could kind of bring automation to play and better workflow management. And can you kind of share that story with us and kind of what you're thinking about that?
Absolutely, sure. One of our areas where we struggle a little bit is when it comes to referrals. We are an FQHC, and here in Nevada, there are a number of our patients who are uninsured. It's very, very tough to get them in to see specialists. And the process that we actually have is one where the providers send the referrals to the department, and then that department then takes it and then try to make these appointments for patients. We do have some technology that we use at this time, but it doesn't seem to be all cohesive. It's quite disjointed where we have our own EMR where the referral team is actually looking at trying to link that with another electronic system that tries to give them information with respect to the specialist, and then still having to make phone calls with that, again, to contact the specialist. So it takes up a huge amount of time when it comes to trying to link all these things and then get back to the patient as well. So I feel that there's some way in which we can actually, if technology can be able to link some of these things, would be quite helpful in getting our patients through the system, because the patients will be satisfied because they are getting their referrals in a timely fashion.
Yeah, and it seems to me like from an employee perspective, 'cause this is about retention, right? I would imagine the way it's working now is a lot of manual work that our employees are doing. It's a lot of tedious work that's being done. And I think from my perspective, it's work that moves them away from the actual patient experience. Right. So they're not really focused on the patient experience and being in that. So it moves them further away from the mission of what we're trying to do. So they're not as connected to what we're trying to do. They're doing a job. They're moving the paper. They're moving the button. So what happens if we use technology right, we can streamline that process, make it more efficient so our patients have a better experience. But more importantly, that the people that are driving these processes can do more. They can feel more productive, less burnout, less frustration with the systems when they're not working. And we can then start pulling in and connecting them to how they actually have an impact on patient outcomes and patient experience. And Manny, Manuel, do you agree with that? Is that something that you're seeing as well in your organization, looking at those kind of things?
Yeah, absolutely. I would probably attest that anybody who's in an FQHC doesn't have challenges with referrals. You know, you're kind of a diamond in the rough.
Yeah.
Specifically, you know, we're talking about a population, highly Medicaid population, that very limited in terms of the specialties that we're able to connect them to care with, and things to that. So it becomes a payer-driven, a market-driven conversation very quickly about the challenges that we have to succumb to. But beyond that, I think I agree with Dr. Nanton's sentiment around, you know, technology essentially being the hub. I think we talked to that a little bit, but tech is kind of uniquely positioned in healthcare to be able to see the challenges that exist in all business units, being that, you know, everyone is so reliant either on data or technology tools to do their work these days. So I'd like to think that we're probably the most you know, significant business unit that has the opportunity to get the 30,000-foot view across the organization and see what the challenges of clinical care are, what the challenges are with patient population health, what the challenges are with finance and ongoing, you know, all of the other business units. So absolutely agree with the sentiment. I think that, you know, we need to think about technology in a little bit different way. The other piece of that is that cloud has really given us, you know, the promise of the cloud, if you will, has given us a unique way to approach technology. You know, it's more about, again, creating more seamless experiences for our employees, whether they work from home or work in the office. We want that to be provided in a consistent, secure manner, right? And so that's, I very much agree with that.